Is the glass half full or half empty? In my head, the glass is very often, well, empty, as in completely empty. And not only that, it is standing right on the edge of the table, about to fall and shatter on the floor, and I will most likely step into it. Optimism felt self-indulgent, reserved for people born with silver spoons in their mouth who did not have to fight for everything they had. My mind is programmed to wonder what could possibly go wrong, so that I can work myself to death to make sure it does not happen. It's like I'm in the Final Destination movie, every single day. And it's exhausting. And science tells us, time and time again, optimism is just better for you. It makes me want to scream, okay, I get it, optimistic people have it better, please stop rubbing it into our face. So yeah, there's a lot of research that shows that optimism impacts not only mental state but also physical health. Optimistic people tend to be sick less often and are more likely to achieve their goals. Philippa Perry said, the trouble is, if you're always looking at the ditch instead of the road ahead, you'll end up in the ditch instead of where you wanted to go. One study shows that men and women with higher levels of optimism live on average 10 to 15% longer than those with less positive thinking. So I'm going to die a failure, and 15% earlier to that. Since I don't want that to happen, I started digging into this topic of how to learn optimism, how to coach and train yourself to be at least a tiny bit more optimistic. And I came up with a list of 6 exercises that I will do over the next 30 days. I'm probably as hard of a case as you can be, so if by the end of my optimism conversion course I succeed, there's hope for everyone. So, what decides if we're happy and optimistic or not? There's this one famous study by Sonia Lubomirski called The How of Happiness, and the study followed sets of identical twins to figure out what makes us happy. It found that 10% of what makes us happy is determined by external factors, such as where we're born, how wealthy we are, how sexy we are. Another 50% is genetic predisposition. And finally, 40% is our mindset and attitude. So there are 2 important takeaways here. First of all, happy people aren't happier because they have bigger houses, nicer cars, more money, they're more attractive. That's just 10%. And secondly, much as we can't influence our genetics, which really sucks, we have total control over how we think and approach life. Okay, but what if you have 3 decades of experience in pessimism and hardwired neuron pathways that tell you you're doomed, like every hour of the day? Well, I had no other choice but to try, so I consulted a few scientific studies, read a couple of books, and watched a ton of YouTube videos to consolidate it into my own optimism conversion course that I designed for myself as a hardcore pessimist. Well, even fatalist. And I tried my best to stay away from banalities such as be more grateful or look on the bright side. So I hope this little course can also be helpful to you. Wow, what a beautiful rainy day to start my optimism conversion course. It's July in London, if you can't tell. Wait, I can't believe I started this optimism chat by complaining about the weather, so please just forget I said that. A lot of the things that I'll be trying out this month are from this deck of cards called Things Are Looking Up by Dr. Deepika Chopra, who's world's first optimism doctor. And one of the things that she recommends is trying to visualize the ideal future scenario where everything worked out the way you wanted, as vividly as you can. And if you are anything like me, this is the hardest thing to do because obviously when you think about the future, the things that can go wrong will obviously go wrong. But this is why I think this exercise is so important. And I try to do it whenever my mind goes into this negative spiral. So, for instance, I recently quit my 9-to-5 to try and make my living out of video creation. And pretty much every single day I'm thinking I'll eventually run out of my savings and I'll have to just go and find another job. But I guess just as that is possible, it's also possible that things will work out and I'll be able to make YouTube my full-time job. The thing is, both cases are hypothetical, so both could happen. Another thing that I try to do whenever my mind goes into this negative spiral is therapeutic journaling called Purge Emotional Writing. And I have another video on that, so you can check it out if you want. Another exercise is called Dodge the Bullet. And I think we all have this thing that we really, really wanted, that we did not get, that we're very happy now we did not. because it worked out better in the end. In my case, when I was doing my undergrad studies in the UK, I really wanted to do my master's at Oxford. And I was studying super hard, came up top 1% of my student cohort, but did not get in. I was extremely devastated. I was working very hard for 3 years to make it happen. Everybody knew I wanted that, and I failed. But later, in retrospect, I knew it was the right thing because the course was highly theoretical, very academic, and I was simply not interested in an academic career. So much as I would have enjoyed reading in beautiful libraries, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed the course itself. And instead I did a very hands-on course in Paris that allowed me to do the type of work that I wanted to do, which is field work in foreign countries, working with big organizations such as OECD, UNESCO. Things worked out for the best. This experience made me realize if I was wrong once about what's good for me, I can be wrong again. So now I'm reflecting on it to try and avoid this all-or-nothing mindset that I'm quite prone to. I've always been very determined, always thought I'm going to make it happen or die trying, which is not a healthy attitude. So now I'm trying to look at my goals, reevaluate, and I tell myself, well, if it doesn't happen, maybe it wasn't meant to be. This exercise is one of my favorites because of how simple it is, and was mentioned by Davina McCall in Diary of the CEO podcast, and I'm going to link this episode in the description box. And she said that she has this tendency to say a lot of negative things, which I do as well. And then she said that she's forcing herself to end every negative sentence with "but luckily," which forces her to end on a positive note. And as I started implementing it, first of all, I realized I say so many negative things, but also I realized it's quite easy to turn things around and always find a silver lining. It could work with those serious things. For instance, recently I said that, well, our rent is likely to increase this year, but luckily I will still be able to afford it if I manage my spending well, and it will force me to be wiser with my spending. It could also work with simpler things. For instance, the weather wasn't great today, but luckily I will finally have the time to read this book I've always been meaning to read. One common misconception about optimism is that it involves being positive all the time, which it does not. But what it does mean, though, is treating all difficulties and challenges as temporary and feeling that you have some agency to impact them. And here comes another exercise that I found. It's called reframing, and it involves challenging yourself to find improvements in a situation that feels bad, no matter how small. So for instance, recently I had a medical emergency where I didn't know what it was. It felt really outside of my control, but I did every little thing that I could. For instance, I did tests, I saw doctors, and I tried to make slight improvements to my lifestyle. One thing that I would note here, though, is that according to science, in order to have any problem-solving capacity as humans, we need 8 hours of sleep daily sunlight, ideally within 20 minutes of waking up, and 2 hours in the nature weekly. So if you feel really apathetic and like you can't do anything, then don't beat yourself up. Maybe you just need to take care of yourself first. Another exercise that I'm doing from the Things Are Looking Up deck is thinking about the things you wanted that you now have that made you happy. And I think it's important because very often, once we get something we wanted, achieve something we wanted, we immediately jump right to the next thing. Like in my case, I wanted to work at Google, I got in, and immediately my response was to think, okay, now I need to get promoted to prove it that I'm worth it. I didn't take time to celebrate it at all. And even smaller things, I really wanted a blender for a long time. I got it last Christmas. And now I'm starting to think, well, it would be also nice to have a juicer. So yeah, I think reflecting on the things you wanted that you now have makes you realize how lucky you are and how your past self would dream to be where you are today with so many things. I feel like in many countries, modesty is an important character trait. In Poland, where I come from, that's definitely the case. Especially for women, I feel. If other people speak well about you, that's fine. But if you do it yourself, you could be considered boastful. And naturally, I find it easier to find things in me that I can improve rather than things that I'm proud of. This exercise that I'm doing seems particularly hard. I'm supposed to write down 3 things that I did well in a day, and I'm looking at today's to-do list. I did 2 out of 6 things that I wanted to do, which seems really bad, and all that it makes me think of is that tomorrow will be very hard. But anyway, I've written down 3 things, very basic for now, like I went for a walk, I read a bit of a book. Deepika Chopra calls it from to-do list to to-do list, and I do hope it gets easier with time. So it's been about 30 days that I've been trying to slowly and progressively implement those things in my life. Not all at once, because I don't want to get a headache from a sudden overflow of positivity. But I've been trying to do 1 or 2 exercises per day, especially the luckily but. I have to say that I do it every single time that I say something negative, which is still quite often, unfortunately. So the obvious question is, am I an optimist now? Well, no. But I have to say that it's much less often that I sink into this spiral of negativity. I also learned that optimism is a muscle that you have to use for it to be functional. And mine was kind of non-existent, but I feel like it's slowly starting to be shaped as I use it. Also, I learned that optimism is a spectrum. So it's not like you are born either pessimist or optimist. You can be optimistic to a different degree in different areas of your life. And currently I'm trying to take conscious steps to move upwards on the scale. There's a very cool TED Talk called The Optimism Bias by Tali Sharot. And it ends with a cartoon that really spoke to me. To briefly describe the idea of it, imagine a cliff and there's 3 penguins on it. One penguin is a reckless optimist. He looks down the cliff and says, well, that's not very high. Jumps and crashes. Another penguin is a pessimist. He looks down and says, I'm not gonna make it either way. And finally, the third penguin, cautious optimist, looks down the cliff and says, well, it's kind of high, but I think with some support I can make it. So he picks up a helmet and a parachute and lands safely down the cliff. This is kind of where I want to get. I want to believe that I can conquer life challenges that come my way, and also that I have the skills to achieve whatever I set out to achieve. So I really intend to make practicing optimism part of my daily life, even though it's a bit hard sometimes. The pessimist in me tells me that not many people made it to this point, but the newly found cautious optimist in me hopes that some of you did. So if you are one of those people, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I would be so grateful if you decided to join me on this journey by subscribing. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon.